But now it is my distinct pleasure to introduce our Deputy Secretary of Transportation, Mr. John Porcari. As Deputy Secretary, Mr. Porcari is the Department of Transportation's Chief Operating Officer, with responsibility for the day-to-day operations of 10 modal administrations and over 55,000 DOT employees in the United States and overseas. He is focused on transportation's key role in economic development and providing the foundation for America's future prosperity. Before becoming Deputy Secretary, Mr. Porcari served as the Secretary of the Maryland Department of Transportation. In that role, he was responsible for an integrated, multimodal, statewide transportation system that included highways, the Port of Baltimore, BWI Airport, statewide general aviation system, Maryland's toll authority, and its motor vehicle administration. Deputy Secretary Porcari thus brings to DOT a wealth of experience and expertise in a broad range of transportation and infrastructure matters. We are extremely fortunate to have him in this key leadership role at DOT. Please join me in welcoming Mr. John Porcari to the podium.
Thanks, Julie, and thank you all for having me here today. And first and foremost, Randy, I wanted to thank you and Michael Huerta and your entire leadership team for the outstanding leadership at the FAA. We feel blessed to have you on board and know that despite the challenges we have, we're making real progress. As Secretary LaHood likes to say all the time, America's skies are the safest in the world, and they're getting safer. And it's in no small measure because of the men and women here today. I'd remind you, in fact, that U.S. Airlines didn't have a single fatal accident last year, and that's the third time in the last 4 years that that's been true. So on behalf of President Obama and Secretary LaHood, thank you for your partnership in pursuit of safety. It's our #1 priority at the Department of Transportation. We are here, of course, to talk about the future today. And very shortly, Administrator Babbitt will put some rubber on the runway, but I'd like to, before that, talk a little bit about the view from 30,000 feet. 2 weeks ago, President Obama used his State of the Union address to lay out his vision for the 21st century in America. He spoke about the investments we have to make to ensure that America's economy grows today and competes tomorrow. He made it clear, once again, that to win the future, we have to first rebuild our infrastructure. The good news is we're already doing it, especially in the aviation sector. We have the strongest civil aviation system in the world, and we are going to keep it that way. The transition to America's next-gen air traffic control system is happening and it's gaining momentum. For example, with ADS-B capability expanding rapidly. Our goal is to create a unified vision, a common operational picture of our airports and airspace, a single screen that ensures that America's pilots, air traffic controllers, and aviation safety professionals can all see the same thing at the same time. Also, through the Recovery Act, our emergency response to the economic crisis that America faced, the FAA funded 246 runway, taxiway, and apron reconstruction and rehabilitation projects, giving many old facilities a new lease on life. We've also seen early success with the tarmac delay rule. If you just look at the facts, between May and October of 2009, there were 546 3-hour-plus tarmac delays. Between May and October of 2010, there were just 12, none of which exceeded 3 hours by more than a few minutes. So clearly, we're making real progress, in spite of some of the problems with foreign carrier flights at JFK during the holiday season that we remember well. Now, in 2011, we're aiming even higher. That's why we've proposed additional requirements that would increase compensation for passengers bumped from oversold flights, additional requirements that would enable customers to hold reservations without payment for 24 hours or to return tickets for a full refund within 24 hours of their purchase, and additional requirements that would make airlines reimburse your baggage fees if they lose your bags. On another front, we're also working to implement the recommendations of Secretary LaHood's Future of Aviation Advisory Committee. We asked this diverse group of policy experts to make policy and regulatory recommendations, and they answered our call with 23 consensus suggestions. Just think about that for a minute. 23 consensus recommendations from an industry that's not typically associated with consensus. So we're closely reviewing these ideas right now. We're working to implement them quickly and responsibly. We will have a full-time person on board who is reporting and directly accountable to Secretary LaHood, who will make sure we're getting this done in the right way. And we'll put in place a reporting structure so we can keep monitoring, evaluating, and refining our efforts over time. The bottom line with the Future of Aviation Advisory Committee is this: these recommendations won't gather dust on a shelf. They won't get forgotten in a file cabinet. They'll guide our actions today, tomorrow, and in the future. As I mentioned a moment ago, President Obama used his State of the Union address to announce his redoubled commitment to rebuilding America's roadways, railways, and runways. And just yesterday, he shared the news that NextGen has a prominent place in the budget he will submit to Congress and announced yesterday. The reasons why NextGen is at the center of our efforts are clear. It lets aircraft fly more directly from point A to point B. It saves time and fuel, alleviating delays, reducing congestion, protecting our environment, and giving us important safety benefits. It'll make our aviation sector, which is responsible for 11 million jobs and $1 trillion of annual economic activity, more efficient and more competitive. So we're very pleased to report that President Obama's budget request for the FAA includes $1.2 billion in fiscal year 2012 for next-gen programs, procedures, and technologies, $5.5 billion for airport and runway projects, with $3.1 billion of that coming from the President's $50 billion upfront boost to spur job creation, and also a $30 billion national infrastructure bank that can be used to fund aviation projects in general and next-gen, including next-gen equipage in particular. So to make room for these investments in transportation infrastructure, we've had to tighten our belts. We've had to cut and consolidate things that aren't growing the economy or making it easier to do business. That's why President Obama's budget freezes overall domestic spending for 5 years, a decision that will reduce the deficit by $400 billion during the next decade and bring annual domestic spending to the lowest level since President Eisenhower was in office. That was 10 administrations ago, if you're counting. That's why the President's budget cuts red tape throughout the Department of Transportation, consolidates more than 50 different DOT programs, includes a number of actions that will accelerate project delivery and help local communities across the nation access the resources they need. And that's why the President's dedicated to doing all of this without passing on another dime of debt to our children and our grandchildren. For the first time, transportation spending will be subject to pay-go provisions that ensure the dollars we give out do not exceed the dollars coming in. There's no question that America's transportation system is at a crossroads. Our choice isn't between policies on the left and policies on the right. Our choice is whether our economic recovery rolls forward or falls backward. It's up to us whether we lay a new foundation for economic growth, competitiveness, and opportunity, or whether we settle for a status quo with outdated and overburdened infrastructure. As Secretary LaHood likes to say, it's up to us whether we do the big things or do nothing. With your support, this administration and department are committed to doing big things. So that's our view of the future. Securing this future will require us to make tough choices. I'm sure we'll hit some turbulence along the way, but you can count on this. Together, we're laying the groundwork that'll get America moving, building, and competing once more. And together, we're making sure that aviation remains a cornerstone of our nation's prosperity. So thank you all for your leadership, partnership, and hard work in that effort. I look forward to our continued and shared successes. Thank you.